How are we doing today? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How is everybody? Are we doing okay? Everybody doing well? Are we making it on this lovely Wednesday evening? See, it's Wednesday evening here. I don't know what it is where you are. Oh, okay. Well, let's not do that. So, it's been an interesting day. It's been a fun day. It's okay. I'm making it, you know. I did think we've got some things got things figured out. Got getting things situated and together. I don't know. We'll see. Working on it. I think everything is. I'm gonna stop saying that because I think everything is still just a work in progress. I don't think I'm ever just gonna be happy with the way things are. Um, I'm constantly moving things around and doing stuff and changing things, and because I think it's because those are the things I can control. So that's what I do. I change the things that I can, and what I can control is what I can control, and what I can't, I just give up on, I guess. I don't know. It's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. But anyway, welcome to Rush to Judgment with Jessica, and I'm Jessica. I'm glad to see you. If you are new here, welcome. Welcome to the crazy that is Rush to Judgment. You never know what you're going to see when you get here. Could be a whole new background, could be a whole new room, could be a whole new something. I don't know. You never know. So, I think it's just I'm trying to get settled, and I'm doing my best. I did my best. So, but I think we're getting there. We'll definitely stay in this room. I say that, and then I'm not gonna say anything. We'll just see. We'll see. But yeah. Again, if you're new here, welcome, and if you're returning, welcome back. I'm glad you're sticking around. I'm glad you're coming back. Yeah, I hope you're enjoying the few things I'm putting out here and there. Again, things have just been crazy. I've been trying to get my life together, really, and just kind of, I don't really know. Haven't really gotten back into the groove of things since the holidays. It's kind of thrown me off a little bit, not gonna lie. So I am still working on it, doing the best I can at this point, but hopefully soon, once I get everything settled and in the place that it needs to be, I will get things back to normal and start putting things out more regularly. But yeah, so that's the plan. But yeah, tonight I'm just gonna do a true crime episode, and we're gonna watch this story about a young lady. Her name is Mackenzie Cowell, and don't really know what happened. Not gonna read the description because from the little bit that I did, this particular YouTuber person, they like to like to say the description of said episode in said episode. So I'm not gonna like reread it and do all of that. So, but like I said, I have not watched this episode, as far as I know. Doesn't, I mean, they all kind of sound familiar, but as far as I know, I have not watched it. And yeah, so we're gonna watch it together and we're gonna react together. And that's what I like to do here. I like to watch things with fresh eyes and react accordingly. And that is how we do it. And I do not. And I just want to repeat that I'm not an expert and I don't specialize in any particular area of educational information. I'm just here to add my opinions and my judgment or my critical commentary on various topics or subjects that I find interesting or entertaining or just, anything that strikes my fancy. So, yeah. So that's what I kind of do. If you like it, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe buttons down there. And go ahead and leave a comment. And if there's anything that you would like me to watch and comment on, feel free to leave those in the comments as well. I'm open for suggestions for things to watch and to comment on. So, and give my opinion on whether you want that or not. That's fine. But yeah, go ahead and definitely like and subscribe. And that helps get the videos out there and the content out there and all of that. So with all that said, I'll stop jabbering and get the video started. We gotta press play over here, not over there, Jessica.
15 minutes. Yet she never returns, leaving her in.
Calm down.
An attractive young woman tells her beauty school classmates that she's going to step out for about 15 minutes. Yet she never returns, leaving her entire community searching for her. First, her car is found. Then, days later, her dead, mutilated body turns up on the bank of the Columbia
We're
River.
just getting right into
What
it.
follows is a lengthy search for clues and suspects, informants and false trails, a confession, a conviction, and a lingering question of was the right person sent to prison. Come with us as we look into the murder of Mackenzie Cowell. We will follow the twisting narratives of the informers and the investigators, clues and
Cowell.
confessions, all in this
said her name
dark
wrong.
and terrible case. Before we start, we would like to send our deepest sympathies to the loved ones of Mackenzie Nicole Cowell, who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case. It was a chilly, breezy February afternoon when 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell decided to take a break from her studies and work at the Academy of Hair Design. She told her friends she just needed 15 minutes and took off, even asking one before she left if she had to sign out of class because she was going to be gone for such a short period of time. Leaving, she went down an alley, up a short set of steps, and into a nearby parking lot. Unhurried, she walks across the lot, climbs into her 1999 Pontiac Grand Prix, and pulls out just a few moments later. Even though there were many cars and trucks in the lot, she was the only person there. Minutes later, she would send a quick text to her boyfriend, Joaquin Villaseño, He responds, and that was the last record anyone has of her as a living person. Family and friends described the tall, attractive woman as a model kid, vibrant, happy, dedicated to dance and building a future for herself. A senior at Wenatchee High School, she was just 2 months shy of her 18th birthday. A member of the school's Applettes dance team, she also enjoyed modeling and had hoped to become a beautician. She didn't return to the Academy of Hair Design that afternoon, but it didn't raise any red flags. Perhaps she had something else to do or had a change in her plans. She did have a dinner date with her father, Reed Cowell, scheduled for that evening. It was a regular occurrence for the two to have dinner together and then watch movies on Wednesday evenings. When her normal arrival time of 5 p.m. rolled around and she hadn't gotten home, her dad started calling her phone. Always reliable and punctual, this was completely out of Mackenzie's normal pattern. Her father's first call went straight to voicemail. He later said the first message he left was a simple check-in message. The second was an "I'm worried, give me a call" message. He kept calling and still got no replies, not even a text. Anger over her not answering quickly turned to worry. After she missed her 8 p.m. curfew, he contacted the local police and explained that his daughter had not come home and was nowhere to be found. Around the community, police officers and deputies began searching for her. She wasn't with her boyfriend. She hadn't stopped in at her mother's house. Her friends hadn't seen her, and she had never returned to the school. Then Reed Cowell received a phone call, not from Mackenzie, but from a police officer. The officer had been called to check on a red Pontiac like hers sitting on a lonely road about 5 miles south of town. A license plate check showed that the vehicle had been registered in Reed's name. It was Mackenzie's car. There was no sign of Mackenzie, although her purse was still in the vehicle. Even though her purse was there, they could not find her cell phone, debit card, or keys. The car had been abandoned along a road in Pitcher Canyon, an area known as Squilchuck. The area was lightly populated and would not have been one of Mackenzie's normal travel routes. The search suddenly went from "be on the lookout" to a desperate race to find the young woman, hopefully before something tragic happened. Neighboring cities and counties put their forces to work on the search as well. A helicopter was dispatched to the area to search where her car had been found. Investigators sealed off the area, and experts began examining the car for any clues. A single set of footprints was found near the car, but they were too indistinct to give any idea who they might have belonged to, Mackenzie or someone else. The FBI was brought in immediately to assist on the case. The Wenatchee area and Chelan County, Washington, isn't an area made for easy searches. Located in central Washington state, Chelan County is located on the eastern foothills of the rugged Cascade Mountain Range. Fed by the Columbia and Wenatchee rivers, the area is known for its agriculture and is often called the apple capital of the world. A long and beautiful valley strewn across the region with small cities such as Wenatchee and the surrounding communities are separated by massive orchards and a wilderness area. Everyone was on the lookout for the 5'8", 110-pound brunette, last seen wearing her black uniform from the Academy of Beauty. Pleas for her return were broadcast on local and regional news, and volunteers searched everywhere. Her friends and family were distraught. Then, on Saturday, February 13th, the announcement was made that Mackenzie's body had been found on the bank of the Columbia River. The place was known as the Crescent Bar, a sandbar in the river that was sometimes used as a party spot by local youngsters. The body, still clothed, was just 50 yards from an unoccupied home that was listed for sale at the time. Crescent Bar is nearly 20 miles by road away from Wenatchee. Police and forensic units flocked to the site and cordoned off the area. The young woman's body, it was judged, had been left at the site after she had been murdered. Nearby were found a number of black trash bags and some duct tape. A long serrated knife was still stuck in the woman's shoulder, and it appeared that it had been left there after an unsuccessful attempt to saw off her arm. An autopsy would show that Mackenzie had suffered a blunt force trauma to the head. She had been strangled and stabbed in the neck leading up to her death. Just when she had died and how long her body had been at the location were pieces of information that was never released to the public.
A new tip leads investigators in Wenatchee to several people who may know what happened to 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell. She She was murdered in February. Her body found along the shore of the Columbia River at Crescent Bar. Annie Bishop live in the newsroom with the latest on the developments.
100 tips in the past 4 months. This is the second tip investigators have widely publicized. We're learning tonight that over the past week, investigators have been interviewing potential witnesses or people who possibly may have been involved in Mackenzie's murder.
When 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell was found murdered along the shore of the Columbia River, investigators, the Wenatchee community, and her parents vowed to find her killer.
I really think that it is time for someone to step forward and help solve this case. I know that you out there know who did this, and it's important to my family and I for you to bring that person forward.
Today, investigators released new information in her case, announcing they've been interviewing people who may know what happened.
There are people that obviously have come up in our investigation. We're not going to call them person of interest yet. We are interested in what they know, whether they're witnesses or whether they were involved in her killing. But at this point, we just want to go talk to them.
Mackenzie was last seen leaving beauty school in Wenatchee 4 months ago. She was found a few days later at Crescent Bar, strangled and beaten with a stab wound to the neck. Captain Doug Jones with the Cowell Homicide Task Force says they received a tip a few weeks ago that led them to a turnout above where her body was found. Investigators sent something to the state crime lab they found at the site, but won't say what. The same tip also led them to the people now in question. With the focus of the investigation narrowing in, they want to make it clear who they've ruled out.
Mackenzie's family were quickly notified, and police immediately redoubled their efforts, asking the community for any leads they might have in the case. Over the coming weeks, the community would mourn the loss of Mackenzie. On the 25th of February, a memorial service at the Toyota Town Center was attended by more than 1,800 residents. There were a few memorial speeches about the young woman, a performance by the Applettes dance team that she had been a member of, and afterwards hundreds of pink and purple balloons were released in her honor. Over 800 tips on the case would come in, and investigators from all over the region began working as a task force to follow up on every lead. A $7,000 reward was offered for any information that might lead to finding Mackenzie's killer. Among the first persons of interest questioned was Mackenzie's boyfriend, Joaquin Villasanyo. Brought in for questioning, Villasanyo said that he had had a short text exchange with Mackenzie right around the time she left the academy, but had not heard from her after that. Her last message to him had been, "Hey, what's up?" Villasanyo agreed to take a polygraph test. Police said that while he did fail the test when asked if he knew what happened to the young woman, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect because his alibi was airtight on the day that she went missing. Also questioned right away was Joey Fisher, the boyfriend of Mackenzie's mother, Wendy Cowell. Police said witnesses had told them that there was a troubled relationship between Fisher and Mackenzie, and that there had been a fight between the two the day before. Police said they were quickly able to clear him of any involvement in the disappearance as well. With those two leads out of the way and completely cleared, they settled into the process of interviewing students and friends of Mackenzie's, both from her high school and the beauty school. The picture that came out was just what her reputation was. A considerate young woman who was very serious about her future. She was responsible and friendly and seemed to have no enemies whatsoever. Police continued to search for leads and clues, but nothing was coming up as the case wore on. Then a surprise witness appeared. Liz Reed, who had been a local police informant, came to them with a bizarre story to tell. Known to police as a drug dealer, prescription forger, and OxyContin addict, Reed outwardly had some credibility issues, but they knew that she also had inroads into the rougher side of life in the community. Her story named names and included details that matched up with evidence investigators had not released to the community at large. Liz Reed began to weave a tale that two men involved in local drug trafficking had abducted and then killed Mackenzie, accidentally taking her for someone that had been working as an informant and snitch. She told investigators the two men had made a video of the killing, a snuff film of the act that she was made to watch. She went on to describe that the men had strangled the young woman and then stabbed her to finish the job. "We strangled that," to shut her up, Liz said the men told her. Liz gave a description of the knife used to kill Mackenzie. It was a pretty close match to what had been picked up as evidence. She also gave the location of the attack as a bluff that happened to overlook the Crescent Bar, the spot where Mackenzie's body had been found. Her story suddenly had clout. The two men named Samuel Cuevas and Emmanuel Budaceros were known to local law enforcement as well. Investigators on the Mackenzie Cowell task force quickly received permission to eavesdrop on the two men, and before long they were both brought in for questioning. After extensive efforts to pin them down and search for the video evidence, police came to the decision that both men had unshakable alibis covering them from the time of Mackenzie's disappearance until the discovery of her body. No records or traces of any reported video had been found. Cell phone data also showed that both men were nowhere near the scene of the crime at any point. Setos would later say that at the time he had been working at an honest job and was trying to lead a better life to take care of his young family. The false accusations and investigations, he claimed, nearly ruined him and his chance of pulling himself out of a troubled past. The police cleared the two men and went on with their investigation. Liz Reed's testimony to police was labeled as a fabrication, even though she still swore that she had told them the truth. However, she later recanted her story and would go on to tell interviewers that she had done so because she was afraid that someone would suspect her in the case if she didn't.
Well, then why did you tell the
Later
story in
on,
the first
Liz
place?
Reed would come back to investigators with another story, this time saying that she had been sent back out to the bluff above the Crescent Bar to find a ring that had fallen off of Mackenzie's finger. She told police that she had located it and produced a silvery ring with a tassel. Even though family members told police they had never seen her wearing the ring, defense attorneys would say that it was visible in one of the still photos that had been taken of the young woman. Cuevas and Cerro, though, both still had airtight alibis. Soon, new developments would lead investigators away from those two men and the questionable informant. It was August before authorities had gotten their next and most important lead. A letter from Theo Keys was received by investigators, and within the young man told of how his friend, Christopher Wilson, was the man who probably killed Mackenzie. Theo, himself another informant, had a history of mental illness and was serving jail time for exposing himself to a barista in town. The letter described Christopher Wilson as a strange man with a dark fascination with death and serial killers. It also alleges that there was a budding relationship between Chris and Mackenzie while they were both students at the Academy of Hair Design. On August the 11th, Chris was brought in and questioned by investigators. Tall, with hair dyed black, Chris was a quiet man whose personal style often featured eyeliner and clothes bought from thrift stores and vintage shops. His hobbies included performing folk music, and he kept a small circle of good friends. He was often described as someone who would stand out as odd in the small town of Wenatchee, but in Seattle he never would have received even a single raised eyebrow. In the police interview, Chris maintained that he really didn't know Mackenzie beyond attending the Academy of Hair Design together. Chris explained that he was there learning a trade so he could help his mother run a salon that she owned and have a career of his own. He said there had been no relationship at all between the two. Chris volunteered to provide a DNA sample, and multiple swabs were taken and sent off to the State Patrol Crime Lab. He was allowed to go back to his life. However, he did not fall off the radar of investigators. Instead, they leaned into the young man's life, his past, and the people around him. As the colors changed in Wenatchee, the local apple crop was brought in. October saw Christopher Wilson also being brought in. Investigators had more than a few questions for the 29-year-old man. They now had a report back from the state crime lab. Chris was initially helpful, as he had been before. Then they asked him about his whereabouts during the disappearance again, and he held to his earlier story. They then asked him how it was that his DNA had been found on some duct tape at the Crescent Bar crime scene near Mackenzie's body. The duct tape that also had her blood on it as well. I don't see how that could be, he told investigators. I want a lawyer. Chris, emotionless, then stopped. He just stopped talking. He was placed under arrest and charged with second-degree murder in the case of Mackenzie Cowell. He was placed under a $1 million bond. Did they have their man? Perhaps. Was the DNA found on the duct tape enough to catch a killer? Probably not, because it was only a partial match, something Chris was not initially aware of. The sample of blood from the duct tape included the match of the YSTR profile to the DNA swabs provided by Chris. The lab was only able to extract a small portion of the DNA strand that was found at the scene, and while incomplete, the match greatly narrowed the field of suspects. In this particular case, such a match could only happen to 1 out of 1,047 white males. Over the month and a half between his two appearances before investigators, a lot of legwork had been done in rooting out who Chris Wilson was and how he could be connected to the case. They found the man's associates often brought up his fascination with serial killers, death, and his love of the television show Dexter, which ran from 2006 to 2013. It was the fictional story of a psychopathic killer who channeled his urges into hunting, stalking, and killing other psychopathic killers. Of particular note was the intensive care that Dexter took to protect his secret and to prevent any evidence from being created. There were long scenes of Dexter covering his kill room with plastic and then cleaning up afterwards. It would draw parallels to the evidence that they would find in this investigation. Chris also had a tattoo of Hannibal Lecter from the movie The Silence of the Lambs on his arm. Having a tattoo of a fictional serial killer and cannibal did little to convince investigators that Chris had no interest in this dark part of the criminal world. They learned that Chris had spent a few months working as an intern at the Telford Chapel in the Valley in East Wenatchee, a local funeral home. He had worked there, but had been let go. Friends and associates, though, said Chris had told them that he enjoyed cutting up the bodies there and had no problem working in the mortuary, feeling at home in the environment. The next evidence would come from the proximity of where Chris had lived in relation to the Academy of Hair Design. At the time of Mackenzie's disappearance, Chris rented a small place at the Burke Hill Apartments. It was just about 3 blocks away from the Academy. That location would become very important. Even though Chris had moved out of that apartment by the time of his arrest, police had a very compelling piece of evidence. Subpoenaed cell phone data from Verizon showed that Mackenzie's phone had both made and received transmissions between 3 and 3:42 p.m. on the day of her disappearance from that general location. Perhaps she had just been driving by or parked outside. But now the main suspect in the case just happened to be living at that very specific spot. They couldn't rule out that Mackenzie had not been in his apartment at the time. Police quickly moved to search Chris's old apartment. Even though the man had moved out and the place had been thoroughly cleaned, it was hoped that some evidence could be found. When forensic experts sprayed the main room with luminol, they were able to see a faint glow from a small patch of floor, a slightly discolored patch. Luminol reacts when it comes into contact with proteins in the blood, and here there was only the slightest trace on the carpet fibers. A small square of carpet was cut out and removed, revealing the padding underneath. The padding reacted as well, and there was much more than a trace of blood. Whatever cleaning efforts had been done to remove the blood from the carpet had not been thorough enough to knock out any blood that had soaked through. The blood from that sample, investigators learned from the State Patrol Crime Lab, did match Mackenzie Cowell's blood. They had just found their strongest piece of evidence in the case so far, one they felt had tied Chris to Mackenzie's disappearance and murder. Investigators also took a longer look at security videos from around the area of the Academy of Hair Design around the time that Mackenzie had left. In one set of footage, a man looking like Chris Wilson can be seen leaving from a different exit and walking north up the alley, the direction that would lead him heading towards home. The video timestamp showed that it was only 72 seconds after Mackenzie had left. Perhaps the two were meeting, no one can say for sure, but the timing was certainly curious. While phone records showed there had never been any calls or texts between Chris and Mackenzie, There were individuals at the school who said the two had begun talking lately, one even suggesting that Chris may have been attracted to the young woman. While these investigations were going on, two other people claiming to know Chris Wilson came and spoke to investigators with tales of the man that were worrisome. The first, Shauna Novak, said that she had been a friend of Chris's and that one evening at a party, he had come up behind her and started to strangle her until she nearly passed out. He released her and then apologized, saying that he hadn't meant to hurt her. In light of everything, she now felt that he had intended to do her harm. Since the event happened before Mackenzie's disappearance, the idea that he may have been using the woman as a practice run became part of the profile they were building on Chris.
I mean,
The second woman had worked with Chris for a short time at a hotel. Investigators said that Chris had told a tale about strangling a guest to death at the hotel with a belt. They investigated the tip thoroughly, but could find no evidence of anyone dying at the hotel during that time, much less anyone being murdered. While they did believe that the witness had been told such a tale, they did feel that perhaps it was Chris just spinning a story for his own entertainment or to scare the woman. Sifting through the mound of tips that had been received since Mackenzie's disappearance, investigators also found 3 separate reports of people seeing a man that roughly matched Chris Wilson's appearance walking down the road in Pitcher Canyon on the day that her car had been found there. Pieces of evidence were starting to pile up, and things got worse for Chris as investigators went through his computer for evidence. They did find searches about serial killers and posts on forums dedicated to the topic. While doing such research isn't illegal by any stretch, it did continue building a portrait of what could be a very disturbed and very disturbing young man.
Well,
An old girlfriend of Chris's, Tessa Marie Schuleman, was brought in for questioning next. 2 videos found on her cell phone would become major evidence in the case. The first video, recorded on June 26, shows the two walking into Chris's apartment and then moving aside a coffee table. The camera focuses on a patch of carpet that has a large brown stain, something police said resembled old dried blood. The following video was taken 4 days later and was of Chris going around the apartment showing how clean it was prior to moving out in hopes of getting back his security deposit. The video pans around the apartment showing the bathroom and kitchen areas, then it scans the carpet. The camera zooms in on one particular patch on the floor and Chris can be heard asking, "Is it clean?" Tessa tells him yes, considering what happened. She does not, however, say what that event might have been. The slightly discolored patch on the floor just happened to be the same spot of carpet where investigators claim to have found Mackenzie's blood.
so he knocked her
Photos were also found on Chris's computer that showed Schuleman laying on the floor of the apartment as if she were dead. Her poses were made in the exact same spot as the stain as well. As weird as the images may have been, they didn't prove anything in particular. The spot and the cleaning of it would require an explanation, though. Chris would claim that a marijuana bong had tipped over on that spot, spilling discolored and smelly bong water. To get the stain out, he had used Simply Green to remove the stain and get the smell out of his carpet. His defense insinuated that Mackenzie's blood had been planted there by police.
out.
22-year-old Schuleman had certainly become a person of interest in the case. Phone records show that she and Chris had spoken to each other at 3:32 p.m. on the day of Mackenzie's disappearance. While it wasn't unusual for the two to call each other, they had been boyfriend and girlfriend at one time. The timing of that particular call on that day was. It was just a half hour after both Chris and Mackenzie had left the academy separately. It was also at a time when classes were still in session, classes that Chris should have been in. Records would show that he would contact Schuleman 5 more times that evening, and that he would borrow her car. Chris, curiously, had a car of his own that was in working order. Why would he need to borrow a car on that particular night? Between the time of the event and his being brought in, Chris had sold his black 1991 Volkswagen, which was later found in a nearby city's impound lot. Phone records also showed that Tessa had called her current boyfriend around 9 p.m. on the night of the disappearance. She had apparently asked him to pray for her because something bad had happened. She and her boyfriend also just happened to live near the Crescent Bar. Schuleman would be later arrested and charged with rendering criminal assistance to Chris in the murder of Mackenzie Cowell.
Confused.
Her white 1991 Subaru Legacy was impounded and searched for evidence. Swabs were taken from stains within the car, a knife was found under the seat, and 3 Camel cigarette butts were removed and tested against DNA found on a cigarette butt near Mackenzie's body. The DNA testing of the swabs and the cigarette butts did not match any evidence that forensic experts had found at that point. With the physical and circumstantial evidence piling up, Christopher Wilson would be going on trial for the murder of Mackenzie Cowell. Prosecutors charged him with second-degree murder, putting together an argument that the two had left the academy separately to rendezvous secretly at his apartment. Perhaps it was a budding romance, perhaps it was a drug deal, or perhaps it was something else that brought them together at that place and time.
A rendezvous.
They alleged that Chris had struck her, strangled her, and then stabbed her, but had prepared the scene to minimize any evidence. He then somehow moved her body to the Crescent Bar and abandoned her car along the Pitcher Canyon. Chris maintained that he was innocent and hired a famous defense attorney, John Henry Brown. He was retained to represent him in court. Brown, based out of Seattle, had a history of defending people like serial killer Ted Bundy and the barefoot bandit Colton Harris Moore. Brown also had history in the courtrooms of Wenatchee, having successfully defended a number of people accused of abuse in what became known as the Wenatchee Witch Hunt. The defense was to rest around the idea that police had planted the blood in Chris's old apartment, and if there had been a killing there as described, the bloodstains would have been much bigger than the small one that was found.
No, he just
Brown also argued for and got approval from the judge to introduce Liz Reed's testimony to the police, bringing back the possibility that the actual murderers were Cuevas and Ceros. An alibi from Chris's mother, Kathleen Sorens, was also brought in, stating that he had been with her during that afternoon picking up cupcakes for an upcoming event. Points were made by Brown and co-counsel Emma Scanlon that no smoking gun connecting Chris directly to the murder had been found. Prosecutors leaned on the mound of evidence gathered and offered Chris a plea bargain deal. If he would accept it, the charge of second-degree murder would be dropped to first-degree manslaughter with a sentence of 6.5 years. He refused and maintained his plea of not guilty to the original charges. A jury was surveyed and seated. Initial impressions were that Chris's innocence would be very hard to sell to the court. Another plea deal was offered, this time with a much heavier set of charges and a longer prison sentence. Under the advice from his attorney, Chris Wilson agreed to plead guilty to a count of first-degree manslaughter in the death of Mackenzie Cowell, first-degree robbery for the theft of her phone and debit card, and second-degree assault for the choking of Shauna Novak. He would serve a sentence of 14 years and 3 months in prison. He would also have to sign a document that he had done those crimes and attest to each of them in court. As the judge read out the charges in court, Chris Wilson responded that he had done them, slowly and thoughtfully. He would later claim that he did not do the actions and that his halting answers were because he didn't want to agree, but he had been left with no choice. Just under a year later, he attempted to file a motion that his guilty plea should be revoked. The motion was rejected. Throughout his imprisonment at the Chalum Bay Correction Center, a medium-security prison in northwestern Washington state, Chris has maintained that he was innocent and railroaded into taking the plea deal. His sentence will end soon, however, in 2023, followed by a term of community-centered supervision. Charges against Schuleman were dropped, and before long she had legally changed her name and left the area. Was justice served? Did the actual killer of Mackenzie Cowell serve time for their actions? The state feels so. But there is an active group of Chris's friends, family, and associates that still maintain his innocence in the tragic event. If he was the actual murderer, then it could be argued that he got off lightly with the plea bargain. if he wasn't the murderer,
I
however,
mean,
an
you know
innocent
what?
man spent more than a decade behind bars for something he did not do, perhaps the victim of nothing more than being odd-looking, being a quiet guy in a community where he just didn't fit in. If you found this case compelling, don't forget to like.
I don't know. Listen, he looked like if he really, really, he would have took that first plea. That's what he would have done. He would have took that first plea. But I feel like he's a smug little shit who thought he could get away with, and he thought he could prove whatever he was trying to prove, and that he thought that he was going to be smarter than them and be like, no, you can't prove it, and you planted this evidence. Bro, how did her blood get in your apartment? They planted it underneath the carpet on the foam part. Come on now. Dirty cop is a dirty cop, but that was going to be your defense, is that the cop planted it and that these other two did it, but their alibis are solid. Should have took that 6 years, bro. 6 years with a lesser sentence or lesser charges and whatever. And no, but your greedy ass, you thought you could get away with it, and you ended up getting twice as much time and all of that. No, you should have went to trial and took your fucking chances. That's what you should have done. And really seen what a jury of your peers would do. But you didn't want to. Because you knew. Wasn't nobody going to believe your story. That was dumb. That was dumb. I mean, he defended Ted Bundy, for crying out loud. I don't know if you knew that, but that didn't go well for Mr. Bundy. So, whatever. I mean, there's weird and then there's weird. Like, you can be weird and not be a killer, but you could be a killer and you can be weird as hell. And I'm not saying that you can't be weird, and I'm not saying that his behavior makes him a killer. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Like, I look up serial killers. I watch clearly a lot of true crime and have probably an unhealthy obsession with watching murder stories. But you know what? A lot of the world population does. It's a very popular genre right now. And it has been for a really long time. People are interested in the human mind and human behavior. Now, why? I don't know. Some people are for different reasons. I find the human mind fascinating, and why somebody does the things that they do. I find that to be quite fascinating. So, that's why I watch it. I don't know. Okay. But yeah, that's that. Yeah. No, I think as far as sentencings go, I can't say one way or another who got what and who does what. Do people get off easy on some crimes, easier than others? Fuck yeah. And do some people get more time than necessary on other crimes? Fuck yeah. Like, it's fucking confusing and doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't really understand it. It's up to so many people's, like, the judge's discretion it doesn't make any sense. You could give this person the max sentence, and then you could give this person the minimum. That's why there's that range. Who knows? Lots of factors play into it. And most of the time, people do plea out and they don't go to trial because a lot of times they don't want to even go to trial. Lawyers don't really want to go to trial. They don't want to try the cases in front of a jury. I mean, they can and they will, but it's a lot of stress. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of work. But that's why you don't see a lot of them. Most of the time, people plea out. But yeah. So, again, tell me what you think. Tell me your opinions, your thoughts, your concerns, your questions in the comments below. And remember to like and subscribe. And I will see you on the next one. Deuces.